25th, people noticed and recorded that they could not access Twitter, that it was so slow that the request would just drop off. Yeah. On 21st, when there were threats of a protest, people noticed that it was taking so long for their websites and for Twitter and for even WhatsApp videos to load, that's an indication of that the internet was being throttled. It was so slow that the requests that you are trying to send drops off. And so from a research perspective, there is indication that we could be having a government that does not do an all-out full shutdown, because we are so democratic and we believe in the rule of law, and we will never deny Kenyans their right of communication. But at the same time, we have these types of shutdowns that are harder to notice and harder to prove, unless, like Hilda had said and Bridget, that you had already started taking the measurements before, and so you were able to show that there was a drop in measurements. But at the same time, the missing link is that you don't have a company that could tell you what actually happened. Why you ordered to slow down the internet? Why you ordered to shut down the internet? We are not getting that transparency and accountability. And even as consumers, we are very concerned that you paid for your 2,500 for home fiber, but at some point you cannot access the internet. It's so slow, you're not able to get value for your money.
I wanted to add something. As you were speaking, I remembered there's also this idea where it's not a shutdown or a throttling, but then the private companies, like for instance Twitter, would take down certain hashtags, right? So if you're paying attention, you would notice it on certain days where you'd see like a hashtag is going, it's at the top, and then it disappears. And then when there's a bit of time, it starts coming back, and then it will be thrown to the edge. So like in such situations, again, okay, we go back to we're just on our own.
I think that's called censorship.
Censorship, yeah.
Where they try to block other people, especially on the outside. Because again, and it's a type of partial shutdown, like blocking of content. The whole idea is to just prevent the flow of information. But I just wanted to add to what Grace was saying. I think, and just thinking about constitution and the type of parliament we have now, thinking about the solutions, because I know we're going to come to solutions eventually. One of the things that we have to start thinking about in regards to the computer misuse and cybercrimes law is that probably VPNs might be considered illegal at some point. So even as we start to think about advocacy and political education, we have to start thinking about digital activism in it and how we're going to also advocate for complete freedom of access to information.
Thank you for that. I think we want to jump into the economics a little because Chris Bomu has mentioned it, and I think you would be best to tell us the numbers we lost on June 24th and 25th, and how do we curb the loss of numbers? Because now we're living in a world where everything is done online, whether it's a doctor's appointment, whether you're buying a dress, whether you're streaming live like we are today. What are the economic losses that we witnessed then, or what we can project moving forward?
Great. I think first and foremost, let me make a few reactions to what has been presented before I get into responding to that question. First and foremost, I think from listening to Bridget in terms of the numbers and how it's increasingly that we are having internet shutdowns. Grace, I think with time now, we have to agree that internet shutdown is not a tool for dictators anymore. It's even for the most progressive democracies. A few years ago, no one would think like Southern African countries like Mozambique would get into that place of shutting down internet. Zambia did it as well, and I think to the shock of many people, Kenya did. I remember before the last election when the government mentioned we're not going to shut down the internet. Bridget and I were in a conference and we were laughing. We were like, it can never happen, it can never happen, it happened. So yeah, I don't think it's anymore like a tool for dictators. I think the other reaction that I heard was Mike talking about ethos and tech companies As someone who works at the intersection of technology and society, I'll tell you for sure, most tech companies don't care about ethos. And you did an amazing thing walking away from that space, but tech companies will never care about it. They are here to make money. That's the big business number one. And we've seen what is happening in the court at the moment. Look at the big techs that are in court in Kenya because of poor business practices. I mean, labor relation issues, poor content moderation. And that is likely to trickle down. And we've seen it with now not big techs, but also tech company. It's going to get into even startups as well. That's the culture. Remember, the investors in these spaces are also people from Silicon Valley. I mean, the same behavior is going to entrench in that. But I don't mean that we can lose hope. I think we have the United Nations guideline on business and human rights, which we can keep pushing and making sure that big, small tech companies at least adhere to that, even in places where laws are not there. If you're in Iraq or Afghanistan, at least there are basic standards that are there for companies to adhere to. Responding to your question in terms of the economy, I think I'm loving the fact that we're starting to look at these issues, not just from a human rights perspective, which I love it. That's why we have Dimas and the rest here. Even the question of data protection, looking at it not just from a human rights perspective, but also looking at it from an economic point of view. And having people beyond civil society organizations talking about these issues, it adds some voices for people who use internet every day to make their living, adding their voices into the conversation. Starts making the conversation not to look like a civil society conversation, but actually are people concerned about these things beyond the human rights perspective. I was telling someone, for example, we keep talking about data protection from a human rights perspective, and we're saying, bias and discrimination, our data is going. But we can also start arguing about data protection from data sets as just raw material for AI models, and start arguing, look, as Africans, our data and things like that. So I think I like it that way. And I think one of the things that I would challenge researchers in the room, hey, Grace, to look at what are the economies. I look at the numbers of people who died, the people who were injured, the whole thing that happened, but also can we flip it on the other side and start looking at how much money was lost for people, for content creators, for companies uses these spaces for it and things like that. It's a new area to look at it, and I think I would encourage us to start thinking about even Kenya manufacturers, blah, 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 to come into the conversation and start looking at how much loss went into it.
The research is there.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that is now, we need to do like advocacy around that as well. And look, you come with your data in terms of, people who died, what that meant to the security, and then Kenya manufacturer or whatever come in with the numbers and say, look, this is the money that we lost, and then get into the table and say, it's not just a human right thing, it's a bigger thing just beyond human rights violation.
I'd like Alphonse Othiampa to answer for me first. Piggybacking on what Muthuri Kathure has just said, is the tech side of Kenya ready to hold the government accountable, even to lengths of suing the government for any losses they have? We've seen it in other countries where companies like Facebook were taken to answer to the government, to the people for either distributing the data of people. Is tech ready to hold the government accountable, whether it's in court or otherwise?
I think we are not ready yet, because the big telcos that are operating.
You didn't even beat around the bush. We are not ready.
The telcos are also beneficiaries of the government services, or let's say they are backed by the government. So I don't know at what point we'll reach where the people will hold the tech companies accountable, because that's the only point I think we can be able to feel that we own the communication channels that we have, or the infrastructure. Because what the government is doing is to help communities get connected, to help the citizens get access to information, but again, they have like almost 90% control of whatever they give us. And therefore, if you look at, for example, if I can mention Safaricom or Airtel, the big telcos, there is little they can do, And we feel like if you touch Safaricom, because the government has shares in Safaricom, we feel like we are touching the government. So we'll be having that fear, like, this is the government doing this. And the only thing we can do as CSOs and human rights defenders is to start pushing the telcos to be accountable of whatever they're doing. If they, let's say, for example, they get a directive from the government that the internet needs to be shut down, then they need to send information prior to its clients and tell her, you know what, unfortunately, we have gotten a directive from the government that we need to shut the internet for 2 hours. So please be informed and be ready to, find alternatives. So that...
Yeah, just to, before we get lost in the weeds here, one thing I will say is that there is a way. There is a way. And I think we're a little bit going to the lost hope side of things. And first of all, to Mudhuri, yes, there is research on this, and it's been documented. I wish I remembered the number, but it's tens of billions of dollars between 2020 and 2023 that has been lost to shutdowns. With regard to holding tech companies accountable, and especially the private sector, it's not just a matter of us asking telcos to say, to tell us whether they've been directed. But there are laws. This is the thing that we must remember. At the end of the day, there are laws. And it's not just the constitution with the freedom of expression. In Sudan, they sued the telcos over their consumer protection laws. And they got a judgment in favor of them. Punitive damages were awarded. So there's a lot of jurisprudence in this area as well. You look at the ECOWAS court, there's a lot of jurisprudence that's coming from there, with Togo, with Guinea, with Nigeria, where internet shutdowns are being declared illegal, for one, and punitive damages are being awarded. So there is other ways, apart from the freedom of expression that comes to us constitutionally a lot of the time. We can hit at telcos from a consumer protection point of view, in as much as we need to think about their licensing requirements and the fact that governments can take away licenses. There are still laws that they need to uphold. Their consumers have rights, and so it's not all lost.
I think before, yes, Damascus.
Yeah, I think we should not be defeatist. Kenya has laws. Kenya still has courts. And certain things can be invoked. Many years ago, there was an issue about data protection concerns with financial services providers, right? So these digital lending apps. This has significantly gone down over the last year or so because of some work that the Data Protection Commissioner did. This is accountability. WorldCoin is not, as we speak right now, operating in Kenya because there is a case. Facebook has 2 cases going on in Kenya, one on content moderation, the other on consumer issues, and they are fighting to ensure that they may not get accountability here because they are not domiciled here, but we are also fighting back. I had a discussion with one senior lawyer who basically was one of the people who brought us the new constitution. And this was about 5 years ago, and I was saying, this country does not respect the rule of law. Then she told me, are you serious? Are you saying that if you go to court right now and you get a court order, doesn't matter? It matters. And that's why government runs to appeal and to do all sorts of things, because we are still really a country governed by the rule of law. But when we now surrender and become defeatists, well, we'll now slide down the rabbit hole. Yeah.
I totally agree.
Can I ask a question? I wanted to ask him a question concerning something you said.
You don't trust me as a lawyer?
No. You said something, but now we understand. Okay.
So we don't get lost on the trail of thought on the response about if there is a way of hitting back, or at least a pushback or recourse on that point, and then you can ask.
I just wanted to quickly mention something about another shutdown that happened, the Telegram shutdown over exam period. And BAKE, which is with us here, BAKE, the Bloggers Association, just kept telling people on WhatsApp, please do the internet measurement and send me the screenshots. Okay, not me, but us, the screenshots. And we sent screenshots, and they used this evidence to ask the question to Communication Authority, was there a shutdown? While I am not sure whether they've gotten a direct answer, there was a leakage, a leaked document that showed communication from the regulator, the Communications Authority, to the service providers, Safaricom, Telcom Kenya, and Airtel, which I think is giving us indication